Welcome to Tactical Reviews for a detailed look at a guided sharpener from KMFS, the Vantaedge Integral. But no, this is not like any other guided sharpener. Here, when you set the angle is maintained by the mechanism wherever you are on the edge, and however long the blade and however curved the blade. So let's have a look and see how does it do this. And this is why the KMFS Vantaedge is not like any other guided system. So first of all, we need to look and see what it is we get within the kit. Obviously here we have the picture of the system itself, but let's have a look inside the case. So we have a set of instructions, and then nicely laid out within the storage and shipping case. So we have the base, a small vial of oil, the upright that will go into the base. We'll do an assembly of all this, but initially we're just going to run through all these pieces. And we have the knife clamp, which is reversible, sitting atop the post. This will come in close because there's a lot of nice engineering detail in these components. Then we have a set of standard stones. These are diamond ones, but the fitment is a very standard type of stone, and there's room in the case. The standard Vantaedge Integral comes with 3 diamond grits, and then we have some of the parts that really make this system work. So forget the Allen keys and a couple of spare O-rings there, but what we need to look at are, so here we have the moving part for the stone and the stone clamp, and a nice little thing for fitting into the case. These, which are actually brass hand and edge protectors, that rotates round, and now we have the sprung clamp for the stone. Again, we'll see all of this in more detail. And then we have these brass pins so that if you happen to overshoot, you stop on the edge and your hand doesn't hit the edge. Then just take that stone out. Going with this, you see here we've got 2 holes. So then we have one of the parts of the system that glides. So we have 2 guide rods and a fixing screw, and that fits into the stone holder, and that gives us our motion. Now, just for not dropping things while we're looking at this, I'll just take that off. And then we have what is the real magic of the system, which is the fixed angle block. Now, here it has 4 set angles. We've got 17.5, 15, 20 and 22.5. And what we will do, so that's everything in the case. So let's say 17.5 degrees per side, one of my favourite angles, and I'm going to attach the guide rods into the top of the angle block. So here we have a fixed angle, put the stone guide on there, and then what this does is it fits into the knife clamp, and then we have a very, very clever part of the system where, because not only does the stone move up and down these guides, but the angle moves up and down. So then as we apply the stone to the edge, the angle basically can't change regardless of wherever the edge happens to coincide with the stone. This is something we'll have to look at really in operation, but just on a basic out of the box, that is why this system is completely unique. So let's move on to seeing a bit more of the individual components. So we've seen all of the major components from the main kit, and I've actually got a couple of extra items amongst the various accessories that we're going to be using while I test this. So the first is a 3000 grit ruby stone. It says oil stone. I'll probably be using it with just a little bit of water, and that's again standard fitment, so optional accessories direct from KMFS. Along the same lines in terms of the stones and getting finishing, so we have a set of leather strops, again with the same standard fitting, and that comes with diamond paste, so you can work towards your mirror edges. And also, while I'm getting used to just sort of lining things up, just to be kind on the knife, I tend to put the leather strop on just to get used to how everything's working. Now, another factor, as we see how this system is really working, and again, to just aid with the way that the special fixed edge angle system is working, we have what is termed the hover spring. So on the angle guide, that is constantly adjusting itself as you use the system, and in order to reduce the weight on that, the hover spring is fitted onto that rod. You squeeze, if you look there, squeeze to release, and then what will happen is that sits and has some of the weight of the system lifted, and you can put the spring collar to wherever it's for best advantage. So not a standard item in the kit, but an optional extra that can help you. With the hover spring, I think it comes with the hover spring, are a couple of stoppers that go onto the guide rods. So when you're sharpening, to help you avoid overshooting, coming back and hitting the edge, these little spring clamps fit onto with a squeeze to open, and excuse me, one of those things you don't want springing off and disappearing, but they're squeeze, so you have to squeeze it quite a long way. If you look all the way like that, get that onto the rod. I would want to line them up a little bit better than that, but you can see then that you get a stop position, so you can actually set exactly where the top part of the stone, pop that leather strop in. So you can imagine knife edge and preventing you falling off the edge. So those are the optional extras that are going to be seen at times within this review. So what I'm going to now do is zoom right in and look at all of these special parts of the system. So we're going to take a look at each of the parts as I build up the actual sharpener itself. So starting off with the base, so designed to be screwed down. Now in fact under here is my guided sharpener bench, and I've got a clamp here which I use for various systems, and in fact I will be putting a corner under that clamp for when I use it. But here we have a nice solid base, and onto that will be fitted the post which holds the clamp itself. So that in the kit we have the Allen key, and that bolt has a recessed hole in the base, and actually we'll look at that post first before attaching it. So the post has a rounded top, there's an O-ring just for some kind of cushioning, and that fits into the clamp, which can be fitted both ways round. So we'll come back to that. So assembling the post into the base, just do that by hand first and tweak the Allen key nice and tight. So that's our base onto which everything will sit. So then moving the next part, the clamp. So within the clamp there is a linear bearing which will take what sets the angle. Very, very nice and precise movement there. And the clamp itself has some very nice features. So this is all aluminium, and the arms are sprung. You can see without actually doing the bolts up, that just pinches shut nicely. And the attention to detail is excellent, because what we have are, I believe, a phosphor bronze bush. So the bolt goes through where, again, phosphor bronze front and back, and as this clamps and you get the movement, you can see there that it's a cup bushing. So what it means is, as it's pulling the arm closed, it's able to rotate and not pull anything out of alignment in the arm. So it's just a really nice little feature. So we tighten that clamp up, and you can see how the bushing is staying flat, and you can see more of the front surface as it rotates within the cup shaped recess all the way down. So it just keeps everything running very nice and smoothly. And so that then, as we've seen before, fits over the top of the post. So you work on it, and then you can pop out the stone guide, flip it over and work on the other side of the knife. So base aside. So the next part then is this special angle setting head. We'll take a look at all of the actions with a wider shot, but the crucial thing here being that the surface on the top of this little block is what fixes the angle. So the part that fits to that has the two guide rods. We'll do that in a moment. So in this case, I think KMFS make one of these with an adjustable head, but for simplicity's sake and complete reliability, we have these fixed heads, and we'll see in action how you choose that angle, and that is the angle that the stone is going to run over the edge wherever you position the stone. This is completely unique. No other guided system keeps that angle. They pivot about this point, and that means you do get some variation in angle. Here, this head combined with joining to these guide rods means that it stays completely fixed. So here on the end, these two guide rods, and this bolt is what fits into the angle head, and then this is, you can see, running on a bearing. So I will pick the 17.5 as my favoured angle, and you can also see here that part of the bolt has a precision ground shaft, and in each of these holes for the angles there's a section that's straight, so we get a full engagement and it keeps this extremely stable. So just whiz this in and you can see that that straight section will work its way into the head. And there we are, just tweak and so here we now have the side to side movement, but this will all pull itself into that fixed angle. Okay, so moving, just put that clamp out of there. So then these guide rods give us what the stone holder is going to run on. So with the stone holder we have again linear bearings like we have in the clamp. So we have two linear bearings which fit over those guide rods. And then on the underneath of that, the stone holder. So this is just using one of the strops, and then a spring here for the clamp of the stone. You can see as I pull back on that, that spring is what is holding the stone, or in this case the strop, and then a handle which is intentionally weighted in order to help pull everything into alignment. And so that fits over these rods, and while we're in close there, that will then be inserted into the clamp. And at this point I'm going to need to zoom out and have a look at the whole thing together. Realising that actually there were a couple of things I forgot while we're looking at the details. So, mentioned in the earlier part, we have what's termed the hover spring, and we also have the little stone stops. So for the angle head and the fact that this needs to move up and down to get the stone skimming at the right angle, this just helps lift a little bit of the weight of the system, and it's been very nicely designed so that you can see there's a split here on the two halves that hold the shaft, so that applying pressure to the side helps open those just a little. That allows us to slide it onto this shaft. I'm going to position that near the top, and then that will engage, so when I bring the knife clamp into place, this sits lifting some of the weight, giving you a bit of hover, hence the hover spring. So there's that. And then for the movement of the stone, this can easily come off the end and your travel isn't constrained there, but we have a couple of little clamps, very much like is often used for a barbell. Keep the weights on the end, and you pinch to open, slip it on to the guide rod, which prevents this coming off the end. So you can set that position. Actually, try it this way. Yeah, that's sitting a little bit flatter. And then they come as a two, so that you can put one on each of the rods, giving you a limit to the travel. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom out and have a look at more of the system. Still in my top-down video format at the moment. So the base, we've seen all these parts in detail. So the base sitting down, just use a little bit of clamping force. This isn't properly set up for use, but just so that it stays put a little bit. Then we have the knife clamp. Just pop a knife in here. Now, actually, while we're looking at this and in this position, so one of those things that affects guided systems is more about the fact that where you position the clamp and then where the stone is sitting. So we can see on this knife how the edge is curving around. Well, not just this knife. Most knives will have a curve, unless we're looking at certain Warncliffes. So putting that in the clamp. Actually, I don't want to do that up because I'm explaining. So when we're fitting this in the clamp, For most systems, you would be very concerned about how straight you put the knife, where you put the knife in relation to the center point, all of those things to try and keep the action of the stone on the edge consistent. Now, this system is so unique because it doesn't matter at all where the knife is, what angle the knife is. Here within the clamp, you just clamp the knife anywhere. You know, you might like to see it looking kind of straight, which is fine, but the way this system works, it does not matter, and that's what's so incredible. So other systems I've used, you would be measuring where the point is in relation to the center line, how far the point is from there, for each knife to try and get things to be consistent. With this system, it doesn't matter. So there we have the knife in the clamp. So sit on the base, turn it over on the base again, and that is what we're going to be doing to flip to both, to work on both sides. With the rest of the system assembled, and in this case I've got the optional stone stops and hover spring here, and that drops down into the hole in the clamp there, and then we bring the stone onto the edge. And well, I'll show from a different angle, is that this, depending on where you are, we have a fixed angle dropping down onto any location on that edge. However long, wherever it is, it drops down and the angle will be exactly the same. So that's something that this is now all assembled. So pop the stone out, flip the knife over, and then drop the stone back in, and same on the other side. So now, what I'm not really set up for, but we're going to now have a look at this from a different angle. Having already taken a really detailed look at each of the components of the KMFS Vantaedge, this is now the point where we can see how the mechanism is working and why this is so unique. So just fit a knife into the clamp. Don't need to worry too much about how precisely this is positioned. So a little bit off on the angle there, but with this system it doesn't matter. At the moment I'm showing this with the strop fitted just because I don't want to worry about where I'm touching it onto any of the parts of the knife will handle if I happen to knock it onto that. So we have that special angle fixture, position that in place, and just leaving it at rest, you can see the stone angle doesn't look right at all, but all that's required is to apply a little bit of pressure, and this part moves up to where the angle is fixed and doesn't go any further. So now we would have action against the edge. As I lift the stone, place it down again, push, and this part of the mechanism sits up and locks in place again, And as we come further along the blade, you'll see this actually is raising up even further. So when it's in this position, it's come up so far. When I move around to where the blade is further away from the angle set, it's gone even further because we've kept exactly the same angle, which is automatically adjusting, thanks to this part of the mechanism, to wherever it makes contact with the blade. So this is what makes it completely unique. What I'm going to do now as well, so here I'm approaching it in two different directions. So in this case, we haven't got the hover spring that we saw earlier, and it means that in order to get the angle into position, I have to apply some light downward force on the stone, giving us a gentle contact. That brings us to the angle that's set. If I now fit that hover spring, what that will do is give us an opportunity to see this in a slightly different way, where now, in order to make contact with the knife edge, the hover spring has actually lifted this sufficiently up so that I'm clear of the blade. But what you can see now is how I've hit a fixed angle and I come down onto the blade, and as I move I get to a different position. The angle is still the same. The hover spring actually helping lift and provide a slightly smoother action. It doesn't matter, it's a nice little addition. But wherever I contact, the fixed angle is maintained, and this is completely different to any other guided system. And that's a really critical thing to see and understand. It means that there is none of this worrying about the position of the knife, where the point is in relation to the centre, how much edge is one side or other of the clamp. So we can see that where I've positioned this knife, there's a lot more distance to the tip than there is to the heel. Doesn't matter at all, because what happens is we set the angle here and it's brought the guide up a certain distance. When I come all the way over to the tip, it's kept the angle of the stone to the edge exactly the same by raising this further up. And that is that unique function of this KMFS Vantaedge system, where we have a truly fixed angle, unlike all other guided systems where this would be at a fixed height, and as the stone comes around it starts to take on a different angle once we come away from what's termed the roofline effect, which the standard guided systems achieve. And here we can see how that angle will be maintained wherever and whatever distance that cutting edge is from the actual hinge of the guide. So setting myself up now for a reprofiling job. The guide on the KMFS is set to 17.5 degrees, which is my preferred angle even on a large knife. And initially, so here nothing is set up at all, I've already blacked up the existing edge on this knife so I can see as I'm making progress. I'm likely to be using the 240 grit for the reprofiling, but for the initial checking of where the edge angle is, I'm going to start with the 600. So this is from the point of not having mounted the knife at all. As we have discussed before, part of the wonder of this system is that it doesn't matter at all how you clamp it. You can clamp here, here, like that, you know, literally anywhere at all, and the system will automatically adapt itself and fit the angle to the knife edge. I will go reasonably central, but for no real need, just because it looks a bit nicer. And again, the absolute joy of this is that if I want to touch the edge up and even just do a strop or a very fine stone, I can pop it in the clamp, set the angle as I want, and it will just touch up only what it needs to touch. So fitting in the 600 stone. So just show that I'm pulling the sprung loaded clamp out, get the stone in place, and we're ready to go. So I'm going to drop this in. Now I have fitted the hover spring, so I may be adjusting that. That's just it takes some of the weight off the system, just making it even easier. And in fact, I'm going to move that hover spring up just a little bit, so we come, there we go. So having fitted the 600 grit stone, just drop the guide rod in to place. I've adjusted the hover spring, and also with these stops I have room to move those just a little bit further to get a bit more of the stone in action. In fact, almost to the end of these rods here. There we go. So now I come down onto the edge, and at this point I'm just cutting onto the edge, but for the reprofile I will go in both directions to speed things up. And you can see here the auto compensation of the system, keeping that angle even though I've gone all the way to the tip here. And then all the way. Yep, and I can see nicely with the reprofile that there are areas already at the angle I'd like, but the majority of this edge is steeper. So in fact what I'm going to do now is let's go to the next grit. So we just lift the whole system apart, release that stone, and in with the 240 grit. Drop that back in, and now I can really work and reprofile. Having marked up the edge, I can see how far I'm going to need to go. I can also feel already how efficiently these stones are running. These are brand new right at this point, so they're not running, and I'm just going to go gently with them so we get them both running and not cause any damage with being too heavy with the diamond stone. So I'm going to stop talking and we'll just have a listen to that grinding of the 240 grit. Now we're going to make use of one of the excellent features of this system, because as I've come round to the tip of the knife and the edge is really aiming back towards the clamp, the amount of stone in contact is really reducing. But because what I can do with this is move the position of the knife without affecting the angle at all, I'm now going to unclamp, turn the blade slightly and reclamp to give me a bit more access to that part of the blade. So just going to blow off some of the filings from the blade. So pop the mount back in there, ease off the clamp, and then you'll see what I'm going to do now is change so that I have more access to the tip. this part of the blade is not going to be affected. The angle will not change. And this is how, as well, if you want, you can actually unclamp, reclamp, unclamp, reclamp. It's not going to affect the angles on the edge at all, unlike every other guided system. So there we are, clamped back in. And let's now go back to the tip. Much better. And again, now no impact on the angle, but you can see the angle just drops down onto the edge wherever you are. You're probably getting a little bit of the local wildlife sounds, which you've heard at the beginning of my videos for years, and that's exactly why it's on there. This is actually why I often use power tools for the reprofiling. A belt sander is quite a lot of work done manually. Once you actually reach your final desired edge angle, then this system makes touching up absolutely minimal, because I'll come back on here, same angle set, and I will only be taking just what I need to take off, absolutely precisely. I think might be there, might not be. Not feeling that burr yet. Okay, further work. So now we can just pop it in the clamp the other way round and present our stone. And all this time you can see the automatic angle accommodation. So spending a bit more time at the tip, because actually with the blade grind I'm getting a bit of a high bevel here. Nothing to do with this system, purely to do with the shaping of the actual knife grind. And of course, the one thing I've forgotten setting myself up here is a torch in order to highlight some of the burrs and progress. I'll remember next time. Apologies if you do hear my headphone cable, and managed to position that so it's bouncing about quite a bit. Hopefully the microphone's not picking up too much of that, but it might be. And again, look at that beautiful angle accommodation. Okay, and even if you catch this at all, now I'm going to I'll turn on the recording, get a little bit further so that on the 240 grit I've done that first reprofiling, and then we can get onto the finer stones. Okay, here's a little lesson learned. So when you look at the safety stops for the stone, there's a little bit of a gap. And what I've managed to do in my haste in this reprofiling is slip off the edge of the stone, find those safety pins and scratch the blade. So let's try zooming further in. It's going to be edge of shot now. So, can you see? I have to go here. Let's go to the blade tip. So, just looking here, and if I go to the brass pin, the stone is onto the primary bevel. Oops, okay, so let's come out a little bit. What I'm actually doing, so with the hover spring kit, we have some stops, these little clips, and that stops the stone holder coming off the end of the rods, and also prevents you from coming off the end of the edge and bashing back into your sharpened edge. Now, I had previously fitted 2 of those on this end of the travel. What I've now done is I've moved one up the other side, and that allows me, although as I work over the stone the position changes where it would run over, but the furthest position is actually the tip. So if I sit it here and bring this stop back down, and I managed to do it again while I'm trying to move the stop. So let's put that in place. And now, with this stop here, and that doesn't go any further back, I'm actually preventing the end of the stone running onto the side of the blade. So, lesson learned by me, and you can perhaps not be so enthusiastic when you're reprofiling, but now I have this limits of motion, so not going too far that way, not coming too far that way. With the major reprofiling now completed with the coarsest of the diamond grits, the 240 grit, this is a little bit of a catch-up and reminder and lessons learned, comments to be made. So when I set myself up on the previous session, I had forgot to bring a torch, which is extremely useful for spotting burrs, bevels, areas that you haven't yet reached. So we also have a loop allowing you to examine the new edge that you're forming. Keep a check on things, that's really useful. Did have the marker pen for marking the edge, but that in combination with both the loop and the torch make it so much easier, especially on a major reprofile. This has been quite a significant amount of work to get through the coarse part. Also then onto clamping. So the fantastic advantage of this system being the fact that, thanks to the special design here of the angle guide and the fact that this system follows, it doesn't matter where the knife edge is, the stone is presented to that edge at exactly the same angle at whatever height, whatever distance. So what that means is when we come to clamping the blade, it doesn't matter from session to session where it's clamped. So I'm going to be reclamping this. But what we can consider is ease of access for the stone, and in this case for the tip, because the blade is curving round a lot, it was starting to get difficult to reach the tip with the blade mounted straight. So taking that just slightly off the straight angle and bringing it so that roughly equal distance. Not essential, not need to be done precisely, but just to ease presenting the stone, and that will be how I want to work with it. Mid-session, doesn't matter, same grit, I can unclamp, reclamp. Doesn't matter that it's slightly different, because with the way the system's working, that stone angle is going to be the same wherever. Now, another part of the lessons learned. So I haven't got the stone fitted at the moment, and to prevent further damage, I'm just going to use the strop leather so I can show this again. So on the stone clamp, let's just bring that in. So we have a gap between the safety brass pin, which is there to prevent you pushing your hand onto the edge that you're sharpening. But now what we have is the end of the actual stone and a gap. So now if you imagine that we've come and the edge has hit the stop pin, this part of the stone has gone beyond the edge and onto the primary bevel on the knife. So in my enthusiasm to get through the major reprofiling, on the very worst possible stone I could have done it with, the coarse one, I have overshot. I've hit the safety pins and I've put the edge of the stone nicely along various places and marked it up. Okay, at least it doesn't have a black finish, this blade, and this is why we do this, to learn how to use these systems. So KMFS provide an optional, so it doesn't come with the standard kit, this hover spring. The hover spring is a really nice concept because when you use this system normally, without the spring, the guide will be all the way down. And what happens is you put the stone onto the knife and apply gentle pressure, which lifts the guide. Here with the hover spring, we're already got a little bit of force lifting the angle guide, just easing the whole way in which that angle is presented. So it's not essential, but it does mean that it's just a little bit of a smoother experience. And without it, the end of this guide tends to hit the base, clunking about, So not essential, but really nice. I would go with that hover spring. With the hover spring, you get some little guide rod stops. Now, I believe the intention is that you put both of them on these two guide rods, being that when you extend, you don't fall off the end of these rods easily. What I've done is I've repurposed one of them and put it at the top end, and the reason for that is that now, instead of relying on the brass pins to stop the stone safely, I've put a stop here that prevents the stone falling onto the primary bevel. Wish I'd known about that before. Anyway, you know now from my experience. So that's the little recap. I'm now just about to fit the 600 grit and continue working on the roughly reprofiled edge, bringing that to 17.5 degrees per side, and I'm going to work through all of the grits and then onto the diamond paste with the leather strop. So just about to start the next session with the 600 grit, and I'm going to, although it's not really necessary, I'm going to mark up the edge bevel with the marker so we can see progress and that I haven't missed anywhere, but we should also see how the angle is immediately exactly the same. So remember, in this part now, I've packed away and come back out, set up, reclamped the knife so it's in a different position, similar but different position, and on other guided systems that would introduce some changes to the angles. So here, by marking the coarse grit bevel, as we move on to this next grit, the medium grit, we should be taking off that marker straight away. So it's a little bit of a prove the point, and I think what I'm going to do is just slightly interrupt, hello Bumblebee, and zoom right in so that you can see, so just fitting that stone in the clamp, and lay that down onto the edge. Okay, so this is recorded, but let's say it's a live test. So I've marked up the edge previous session with the coarse sharpening stone. I've put marker back on that edge with the knife completely reclamped differently to the previous session, and I'm going to pass the stone over the edge and hope to see that marker pen coming off, so if the video will show it. So here we go. Certainly from the angle I'm at, I can see that I'm working exactly the bevel that was there previously. Shift that round. So all the way round to the tip here. I can't even see. Hey, and there we go. So that reprofiled edge bevel now just cleaned of the marker pen. That's the bit that I haven't even done there. And this is with a repositioned, reclamped knife straight into the next session for the next grit. This is now going to be a bit of work, so I'm just going to work my way through easing the scratch pattern from the previous grit on both sides, and might include a bit of a speeded up bit of video, or not, just make you fast forward it. Okay, let's zoom back out. So I think that's enough work on that side, so we'll swap over. And again, we've got a fresh marker on the edge here to show, I'm not going to zoom in this time, but just work off. So the marker is especially useful at some of the extremes to make sure you actually have got there. Just right at the tip, there's a little bit of consideration. The contact area, because of the way the system works, you don't have the same twisting of the stone that you have when you have a single guide rod. So in terms of how it's contacting the blade, the angle is perfectly set, but it's not rolling over with the edge, which means as we come towards the tip, I need to be on the far edge of the stone to have the contact, which does make the very end a little bit tricky, because you have more of a tendency, you might have noticed earlier with me, like I've just done there, falling off the tip a little bit, is because in order to get to that very last part, I'm having to kind of pass the stone off the edge of the blade, off the tip of the knife. Again, always during these sections of working, you can see the guide conforming, keeping the angle correct all the way through. As I go through, you can see here how on a standard system, all the movement you see here would mean inconsistent angles along the knife edge, and changes if you reclamp the knife. That would all change again. Also, you don't know, probably haven't seen that, but the very edge of the stone, I'm hitting here the end of the sharpened area. There's no sharpening choil on this knife, and that is scratching off some of the plastic diamond stone mount, which doesn't matter at all actually. So there's little shavings of that occasionally coming off as I run it against the extreme of the edge there, but I want to sharpen it the full length. That is looking pretty good on the 600 grit. Again, with this single direction pass, you really see this system running, and this is again why with the hover spring it actually really is an advantage, because it just presents itself easily without the downward pressure that's required without the hover spring. So now single direction passes onto the edge. One more set of those and then I'll flip over and do the same. Okay, let's keep this section running, flip over. You see quite a lot of the grindings, and this blade, don't know when it's happened, but it seems slightly magnetized. So single direction passes as a clean up. This side I've already worked for this grit. If it weren't for the camera gear, I would probably just use this air duster. It's quite an impressive thing actually. One of those extremely powerful air blasters, battery powered, and I'm just going to take this and blow some of those off away from the camera and the other gear. So in terms of cleanup, that is, there's no stropping, nothing, that's just down to the 600 grit, assuming that I have reached the apex, raised a very small burr and actually created the new edge. So again, live test. Rather actually cut, so let's see. Okay, so I've got burrs. It's not a refined edge at this point. Just curious to see where we've got to. Not very good at this point, but we're doing a major reprofile. So continued work with the 600 grit because I can still see scratches from the 240 grit. That's under the loop. I did have to take a closer look at it. So, don't know if I'll catch it in the edit, if I have this section playing. Don't know, just going to make this comment that you might have noticed, including dragging the stone along the edge, different angles of working onto the edge, and this is all to change the scratch pattern and give me something I can see to then change, wear off again. Make a scratch pattern, change the scratch pattern, lets you see your progress. And each forward stroke is just a little bit more pressure than the backward stroke. It's time to move to the next grit. So swapping over to the 1000, first of all, just pop the 600 off, give it a quick dusting. I'm also going to give the knife a dusting as well. The coarser filings, just get them out of the way. Definite signs of at some point gaining some magnetisation. There's a few dots, maybe during the manufacture process. And it's our 1000 grit. Not going to use the marker pen this time. For you, while you're looking at it, this is a point where the scratch pattern changes quite significantly. Also, with the finer grit stones, quite often what I find is that, especially at the extreme edges of the stone, there is initially, it's quite a bit rougher and you tend to see scratches. So again, it's all the process of getting the diamond stones running and working better. So no way I can show this really. I'm just working that scratch, the previous scratch pattern off, and looking at the reflections on the cutting edge as I work through this grit progression. I'm also not going to expect a perfect result, and with the new diamond stones bedding in, then we'll have the ruby stone. We will get onto the ruby and the strop, but those, I'm certain there's still going to be some scratches from the diamond stones that are not running yet. Doesn't really matter. Do you count the number of passes as you go through the grits? I do and I don't. Sometimes I do as a starting point, and in other cases I'm just going to be looking at the scratch pattern and make the choice, the determination myself that I have worked that grit enough. Again, a loop and a torch being your best friends for checking this type of thing. Yeah, slowing right down at the blade tip where I have a tendency to fall off. I don't want to round off the very extremes, so I'm going to take a little bit more care there and just give it another guide, my finger. So that is going to force me to slow down a little bit as I then pick up speed for the rest. So just to give myself a bit of chance of catching this and pointing it out in the video, and the wonder of this system being the way this angle is constantly maintained. Of course, within this entire system, there is some play. Materials bend, joints flex, bearings, you know, everything has a little bit of movement. So when you're pushing onto the blade, and especially without the hover spring, there is going to be a little tiny bit of flex. And when working through the grits, there are some areas where you may work on it and not see the scratch pattern change how you want. And in fact, that is likely to mean that you're not quite applying enough pressure. So we need to be careful. We don't want to really work diamond stones hard into a surface. We're going to wear them out, we're going to damage them. But what we do want is to get enough contact pressure. Now, probably not, and the whole thing here, this board is flexing, so I can see, I'm not going to be able to show it on the video, but with the little bit of pressure difference here, there's the tiniest of movements here, and with that scratch pattern coming on with the 1000 grit stone, I can see some little patches getting towards the edge that weren't quite, getting the treatment they need. Just a tiny bit more pressure. Let's just say that again. Only a tiny bit more pressure. Without the hover spring, the system actually requires you to apply a little bit more pressure. So I prefer it with the hover spring. You might actually find that without the hover spring that works better. In fact, I must show that. I'll do another section with that. And so our angle is super consistent. It doesn't matter where you are on the blade. It doesn't matter how the blade is clamped, but there is, in a system like this, there's always a tiny bit of flex. So you need to make sure that you do apply sufficient pressure just to allow for that very small amount of play in the system to catch the entire edge. You probably do it without thinking and without the hover spring almost certainly. I'm just mentioning it here because I actually seen that, and there was a patch on the edge where I wasn't quite reaching the cutting edge and didn't like the look of that, and it was just needed the tiniest bit more downward pressure. I'm getting used to just holding this gently and not really pushing down. And I'm just going to stop the video again, take the hover spring out and show you the difference. So here, after another part where I was talking about a little bit of flex in the system, just going to show the difference. So hover spring in, and as we move, the whole system is kind of lifting itself. So take the hover spring off. So hover spring off. Now when I pop this back in, the angle guide is going to go right down, hit the ground. So at this point, the angle is not correct. Sitting on the knife, and if I push down, it lifts this, locking that angle in, and it will work it across, you having to keep that little bit of downward pressure. And if you fail to keep the pressure, in a way, it's another reason why I like the hover spring. You can end up working the top of the cutting bevel, where what you really want to do is just come straight down onto it. But the point here being that I'm now, you see my thumb, I'm having to push down. Previously I could hold the handle this way and just come down onto the blade. Now it sits not at the correct angle and I have to push down to lock that angle in. I'm going to go back to having the hover spring. I think it's a really excellent addition, and this was just really explaining how that aspect of there being a little bit of play within the whole system, the tiniest amount, you can't help it. You've got rods, you've got joins, you've got bearings, everything. There's going to be a tiny amount of play that adds up, and having to apply the downward pressure ensures that I am keeping, working through the play that there is. With the hover spring, I'm being a little bit lazier because I don't have to push down very much, and that led to a section where I wasn't quite getting to the cutting edge. So that was the point of that. Let's pop that hover spring back on. Okay, and the hover spring was working nicely up there. You can just change where that is. So I think that's good to go again. I'll keep working this along. Okay, so I think with the 1000 grit, I'm now at the point I would move to the next stone. Just come in for another little test. Well, that's now just so without any other finishing, straight off the 1000 grit. It's just falling through a thin paper. I call that's TV guide, but it's very equivalent to receipt paper in the way it cuts. So we're going to blow the dust off and give it a first show of a tiny bit of water. Another quick break because I've just mentioned showing the first bit of water to the system. So, having finished the diamond work dry, that's how you need to work it. The diamonds need to stay dry. What I want to do, a little bit of cleanup, I'm going to blow off the dust, and for the ruby stone, online in the documentation it does mention using some honing oil, but actually the recommendation from the makers is a tiny bit of water. So I'm just going to wipe a little bit of water on, and then have a paper towel with some water that I'm just going to keep wiping that clean every now and then, and that will be a minimal amount of water, because we don't want water getting into the bearings in this system. And I'll also be just using a tiny few drops of water just for clean up on the dust as well. So we're moving on to the ruby stone. It's going to want to keep blowing away, but I've just got a tiny bit of water, literally a little dropper bottle. Don't want a glass full, don't want loads of water, so just a few drops on this paper towel that's going to want to blow away, and I'm going to wipe over the surface of the stone and put one more drop. Try and keep this at bay with a torch. Okay. So fit the ruby stone. This has got a nice aluminium holder base. The others have got a plastic base. So in this instance I do have to be a little bit more careful rubbing the stone holder itself on various parts of the knife. For the diamond stones and the strop it's all plastic, but we've got an aluminium stone holder here. I'm already seeing shiny reflections coming off the areas that I'm running this ruby stone over. It also reveals those scratches that I haven't removed through the progressions, but they're new diamond stones. I'm not going to expect a perfect result here. I do like a ceramic stone following the diamond. This is looking for myself in normal use. I wouldn't go further than this. A mirror edge is beautiful, but for me not the best cutting edge. So let's have a little look. So we've got a bit of build up on the stone here, so I'm going to give that a clean off wipe, a few more drops. So wipe that off the stone, another drop, and that's it, just one drop of water. I have to slow myself right down on the tip here. So this rocking you're seeing, it's not this KMFS system, it's the base. So it's rocking slightly. Going to put a drop on the edge that will get picked up by the stone. And having to slow down again at the extreme edge. So I can see that single drop is still allowing some lubrication. So I'm going to look for when that, if that dries up, I'm going to give it a wipe off and another drop of water. Time to flip over. Let's give that a wipe. These stones will always have some markings on them, and you can see what's coming off. But what it also means is from time to time I use a kitchen sort of cream cleaner or bathroom cleaning cleaner, and that will take off some of the more stubborn just a quick wet wipe off the edge there, and ready to flip over. It's probably easier to let it pick up a drop off the edge. I'm going to put 2 drops on there. Take my time at the tip again. Slightly dried out. Let's add another drop. Okay, so another extreme point that I need to slow right down on. Just on those very last few millimeters that I want to control my movements more. As you can see, I get a bit gung-ho and moving very quickly. He says speeding right up again. Let's just get away from the edge now, and then off I go again. So, almost looking like marker pen. I've now got a trail of slurry from the sharpening on the edge. Just see if I can catch that. The light here is changing, make it a bit awkward to show, but I'm going to wipe that off and then run it over clean. And we'll also move from the bi-directional to onto the edge only for a final clean-up. But what I wanted to do was work this and polish it with this ruby stone, and we will go with the leather strop and the diamond paste as a final, although I wouldn't normally bother, not for a big knife like this. But we're going to see what it looks like. Getting quite a bit of muck on there now, so give this a clean up and the knife a clean up. Gonna get plenty off here. But that wipes off nice and clean. Just have a look straight off the ruby stone. Without any stropping. What I also hadn't done on the ruby stone before that quick paper cut was a onto the edge only set of passes. So I'm going to put a couple of drops of water up the blade, so pick up and onto the edge. And we're also going to keep alternating the blade on this, so the side that we work when we're doing these final strokes. over. So I made a broader torch with me. I also have the sunlight now to help me. Very revealing for any faults in cutting edges. Always bright light is very, very helpful. So I'll do one last pass on the other side. Remembering that although I want this to be a light pass, I do still need to apply that little bit of pressure to make sure the flex is taken up in all the guides. And there we are. Little wipe off, being extra careful. Always away from the edge. And dry. Certainly glinting in the sun for me. Let's give that edge a bit of a chance to and that bit of paper I'm reducing. So still not stropped, but with a final pass on the ruby, I mean that is more than enough. Though I haven't refined the edge quite as much as I would want with a mirror finish, and I'm going to go with a strop and diamond paste. You can just use the leather strop to ensure you haven't got any burrs. So you could use this plain, you could load it with a standard polishing compound. What I'm going to try and show here, so during the setup of this system, and when I just wanted to demonstrate and I didn't want to rub diamond stones against bits of knives, I'm not paying attention, I popped on the leather strop just so it looked like it had a stone and I could play around with the system and not be in danger. What it's done is just gently, while it was moving around, it's shown one of the things you've got to watch out for with the leather strop, and that is that when you're working it, you are only coming off the edge, because if it'll show, so I've got a little nick in the leather here, which was just happened to be the guide rod arm swinging and touching the leather strop just against the cutting edge, and that's given us a slight break in the leather, and we don't want that. If you go onto the cutting edge, you're just going to destroy it, and so it's always working off the cutting edge. And with that little flap in mind, I'm going to mount it in this direction. So it doesn't matter that it's dry at the moment. So remembering that now all of the strokes are down, down, and away from the edge. So, gonna pop a little bit of the diamond paste. Gonna put it near this end, the handle end, but make sure that I'm actually gonna get the edge, because this action is going to spread it along the strop naturally anyway. Little tube, KMFS supply. And we only want a very small amount. A little bit goes a long way. So in short. YouTube, it's not coming out yet. Oh, okay, so it's quite stiff, this diamond paste, so just a little tiny blob there. Might need to reload when we swap sides, but that's how I'm going to start. So it's quite a thick paste. And remember that when it spreads, it's going to be working into the leather and then working further. It's going to load up a little bit more. Remember as well, with these being standard stones, you also have options of a glass platen and the diamond strips. Sometimes that's easier to use than the paste. So I'm now trying to pick that paste up where it's just gone and not going to be any use. So my clamp, I've not actually screwed this to the base, just moved a little bit, just tightening that up. We've done a major reprofile here. And with a diamond paste, you're going to end up with, as you do with most polishes, a kind of a smoky residue I'm not actually able to see the really final result at this point because it's just sort of dry paste running over. Let's give that a wipe off. So I think I'm actually going to use the trick of a bit of paper under the strop for a clean off. I can feel it really biting now. Cleanup will be easier out of the clamp. It's just I wanted to see how I'm getting on. So let's work the other side. So with this particular paste, and seems not to spread that easily, so I'm going to just dab it up the strop. So I've just done one wipe across the cutting edge to spread that paste out. Remember, always off the edge. I will say this hover spring is essential really for the stropping, as it allows you to drop it back down easily. Really recommend that hover spring for this. And for the strop, do you know what, I'm going at this a bit harder. I always tend to strop very hard and just want to make sure I've got no burr and that I'm definitely reaching the cutting edge. So I'm being quite firm, firmer than I am with a diamond stone, quite a long way. So I think we're now ready for a bit of a cleanup. Just share a little trick that I tend to do with stropping quite a bit. Once I've used any form of polishing compound and there are residues on the edge, on a bench strop I'll lay over some kitchen paper. What's quite nice with the system and with these stones is that you can wrap paper around it, clamp it in, and the paper is held on top of the stropping leather. So all I'm doing here is taking off excess compound. I'm going off the edge so it shouldn't cut the paper, and I can just keep swapping the paper as needed. So here, and this is cleaning off all of the polishing compound residue on the actual cutting edge. Not on the blade, so you might need to do some cleanup on the sides, but just so you can see the polish on your cutting edge. And there we are. So, complete reprofile, working through all the stone grits, diamond, ruby, strop, and then diamond. And here is the final edge. Yes, there's some scratches because I haven't quite refined enough through the grits. The stones are new, but that edge all on system, so I haven't done any extra stropping. A bit windy out here for handling paper, but let's see how I can get on. Still in the clamp, doesn't really matter because we can reclamp as needed. And this is now, I mean, it's like it's not there. So that's the KMFS Vantaedge integral guided system with the only true fixed angle guided system. Thank you for joining me, and remember, get informed, be prepared, stay sharp.